So welcome everyone. It's really nice to see so many people. I was expecting a smaller number, but it's really lovely. It's really nice to see everyone here. And it's really nice that, I don't know why you're here, but I suspect maybe the title, Love Without Illusions, maybe it's the last talk, so you thought I better go and get a little bit of Dharma before I leave the festival. I don't know, but thanks for coming. So I need to say it's not a thoroughly prepped through talk and thoroughly kind of researched, if you like. What it is me sharing some of my ongoing reflections from over the last just around the 10 years of practicing Buddhism. And I wanted to start with something very human. I want to start with a little reading from this novel, which I really love. It's called Gilead. I'll read you from it. I saw a bubble float past my window, fat and wobbly and ripening towards that dragonfly blue they turned just before they burst. So I looked down at the yard, and there you were, you and your mother, blowing bubbles at the cat. Such a barrage of them that the poor beast was beside herself at the glut of opportunity. She was actually leaping in the air. Some of the bubbles drifted through the branches, even above the trees. You two were too intent on the cat to see the celestial consequences of your worldly endeavors. They were very lovely. Your mother is wearing her blue dress, and you were wearing your red shirt, and you were kneeling on the ground together with Soapy, the cat, between, and that affluence of bubbles rising, and so much laughter. Ah, this life, this world. I really, really love that paragraph. And the book kind of goes on like that, and it's such a lovely kind of... So this is a man, the man who's writing, the character in the novel, it's a woman writer. The character in the novel is a man who is dying. He knows he's dying. He's got a heart condition, and he's old, and he knows he's going to die. And he's got this son, young child, and the whole book are letters to his child for him to read when he's older. So it's a very tender, really, really lovely book that I highly recommend. So Gilead by Marilyn Robinson. There it is. And the reason why I wanted to read you that was because, so this is Love Without Illusions. So the title of the talk is Love Without Illusions. And I think the first thing we need to get in contact with is kind of just a very everyday life, tenderness, love, appreciation for kind of everyday life. And that's what this book does. There's this sort of sense of him really appreciating the everyday life, seeing beauty everywhere, and really appreciating very vividly kind of each moment. That he knows he's going to die, and his son is there. He really regrets that he's going to die. So there's this sort of constant tension. That he knows he's going to die, and he deeply loves his son, so he really wants the best for his son. And throughout the talk, I'm going to refer back to the Buddha, who gave a discourse on love, called the discourse is called the Karaniya Metta Sutta, and it's all about love, and we're gonna explore what the Buddha meant by love, by real love. And I'm just going to read you through this text, and then we're going to go through it. The first time I heard this text, it was just by chance. I was in Mexico City. I'm from Mexico City. And I had just been going to the Buddhist center for a few months, so I just kind of was getting familiar with meditation and Buddhism. But the reason why I went to the Buddhist center was because I wanted to find a way to learn to live by love. So as a child, I think like a lot of us, we sort of have glimpses of like the best way of acting is a loving way. Love is the best way of acting. So as a child, I remember, some of you might have heard me saying this again and again, but I'll climb up this tree, my favorite tree. I used to live in the countryside. This was in Mexico City. And I would lie on the branch, on one of the branches, and I would feel completely and deeply happy. It wasn't just, happy is not quite the right word, it was just deeply contented. I was kind of there I was supported by this branch. The leaves were kind of shining green, the sunshine was shining through, and I felt this beautiful kind of sense of connection with myself. There I was, my body was completely relaxed on the branch. The branch was holding me, so I felt connected to the tree, the leaves, the sun, the sky, people passing by beneath, and I wasn't really thinking about it, but looking back, it was like I felt so deeply part of everything, part of like my whole environment in that moment. So I had that beautiful experience, and then in contrast, I had the news and people being mean to each other and people being kind of being violent to one another and damaging the planet and all of that. So I had those two experiences, and as a child it was like, and I myself, I would be mean to other children, and that would be, I feel really guilty about it. I kind of like, I know I must be loving, but here I am kind of punching this boy. Like, where does that come from? So I've searched for a way to learn how to live by love. I was brought up a Catholic, kind of loosely, and Jesus says you kind of love thy neighbor. But how? Like, how do I love my neighbor? How do I learn to love myself deeply and truly? And how do I learn to love other people? And how do I learn to love the planet? So that took me on a search, how to love, learning how to deeply love. So I learned to meditate, and I thought, yeah, this feels good, this feels like the right path. And then one day there I was, waiting at the Buddhist center outside one of the shrine rooms, and there was a meditation class going on. And the person leading the class started reading the Karaniya Metta Sutta. And when I heard these words, I was completely in bliss. It took me back to being back on that tree. See, it expresses the kind of that. I'll just read it to you. The Karaniya Metta Sutta. He who is skilled in his good, who wishes to attain that state of calm, nibbana, should act thus. He should be able, upright, perfectly upright, of noble speech, gentle and humble, contented, easily supported, with few duties, of light livelihood, with senses calm, discreet, not impudent, not greedily attached to families. He should not pursue the slightest thing for which other wise men might censure him. May all beings be happy and secure. May their hearts be wholesome. Whatever living beings there be, feeble or strong, tall, stout or medium, short, small or large, without exception, seen or unseen, those dwelling far or near, those who are born or those who are yet to be born, may all beings be happy. Let none deceive another, nor despise any person whatsoever in any place. Let him not wish any harm to another out of anger or ill will. Just as a mother would protect her only child at the risk of her own life, even so let him cultivate a boundless heart towards all living beings. Let these thoughts of boundless love pervade the whole world, above, below, across, without any obstruction, without any hatred, without any enmity. Whether he stands or she, walks, sits or lies down, as long as he or she is awake, he should develop this mindfulness. This, they say, is the noblest living thing, living here. Sometimes it's translated as is like living in heaven here on earth. That's another translation. So I heard these words back, I was 17 or so, and I thought, yes, I want to know more about this. So I have spent the last 10 years kind of trying to understand, reflecting, trying to really practice as much as I can this sort of love. Tried and failed and tried again and failed and tried again and kept trying. So it's a constant sort of learning. So the first verse is, he who is skilled in his good, who wishes to attain that state of calm, nirvana, should act thus. He should be able, upright, perfectly upright, of noble speech, gentle and humble. So I'm not going to go through all the verses, but that particular verse, I think one thing to draw out of that is this word able and upright. And I want to contrast that. So I'm going to go back to my experience of being a parent. And I think I'm going to draw out this other verse, which I think is the pinnacle of the text. Just as a mother would protect her only child at the risk of her own life, even so let him cultivate a boundless heart towards all living beings. Sometimes also translated as just a mother would love her only child, let him love all living beings. So that's sort of you get that idea. So I'm not a mother, but I'm a father, and I think the Buddha was very insightful in noticing that kind of the love of a mother for her only child. So I want to draw out some of the kind of the things that I've learned out of being a parent, and so the first thing is that you just have to be really practically helpful. For all the parents here will know, you just have to be straightforwardly helpful, and if you resist it, it will kind of tear you apart. If you resist being just practically helpful, it's just not going to work. You're going to kind of end up a bit miserable. So you just have to be, as much as possible, you just have to be straightforwardly helpful. If the washing up needs doing, you do it. If a nappy needs changing, you change it. You can't leave like a poo or a wee there for a long time. Although I think my daughter has a wee at the moment in there. So okay. You just need to kind of respond. And this first verse is sort of he's saying you need to be, in order to love other living beings, you have to kind of be together. I think that's sort of what he's saying. You have to kind of put yourself as much as you can together and be as straightforward as you can. Able, practically helpful, upright. By upright, I think he means ethical. So you have a clear conscience. So sometimes when I do something that I kind of regret, that weighs me down, and that my ability to look after other people reduces, because I'm sort of weighed down by this thing that I've kind of wish I hadn't done. So I'm caught up with myself, I'm caught up with my own sort of problems. And someone who's caught up with their own problems is not necessarily the best person to look after other people. You're trapped in your own problems, and so you can't see other people as people, and you can't see other people's kind of problems, and you can't help them. So I've made a practice, which I keep sort of, it's a practice, so I keep failing. I made a practice to, as much as I can, just do what needs to be done. And often I resist it, and that's when I suffer the most. Often I can tell myself, well, I'm really tired, I just need a rest, I just need to go and meditate, I just need to go and whatever. But the more I tell myself that, the more I'm suffering. Whereas if I just there's the washing up, I'm just gonna do it. Even if I'm really tired and exhausted, it's much better if I just do it, because nobody else is gonna do it. So able, upright, free of regrets. Particularly looking after a small child, a newborn, you see them how it's so beautiful, isn't it? When you see a newborn, they're so they're all curled up. I was remembering how my daughter's hand, my wife pointed out how her hands used to be completely curled up like that, like a leaf. And slowly, as she's a year and a half now, slowly as she's kind of grown, her hands are kind of open, and that reminds me of a leaf, the leaves or flowers, they start kind of curled up and then slowly they unfold, which is also a metaphor for our minds. It can be a bit tight and folded like that, and we can kind of help them open. So there they are, completely vulnerable when they are born, and you just have to help them. You just have to help them, practically speaking. So that's one thing that I take from that first verse. You just be straightforwardly helpful as much as you can. And in order to do that, you need to be fairly integrated and positive. So a lot of the Buddhist path is a lot to do with dealing with your own sort of troubles and emotional turbulences and mental so that kind of you work through that, you become more integrated, more robust, more emotionally robust. Your mind becomes clearer, so that you can take other people in. You can really take other people in and look after them. So you start by learning how to look after yourself and dealing with your own kind of stuff, so that you can look after other people. And an aspect of it is the second verse: contented, easily supported, with few duties, of light livelihood, with senses calm, discreet, not impudent, with not greedily attached to families. I'll draw out the element of contented particularly. If we, again, in our everyday life, particularly if we have a job, even if we don't have a job, it's so easy to get busy, really busy, just like do all sorts of really good stuff. Or bad stuff, I don't know. Both are possible. But if you're constantly busy, if you're constantly doing something, you're not necessarily looking after yourself. You're not necessarily looking after your mental well-being and your physical well-being and your emotional well-being. You're constantly doing something, even if it's something really good. Like volunteering loads or doing lots of like yoga classes and meditation classes and all of that. Like you might need that. You do need activity. But if all you're doing is outward activity, you're kind of neglecting the garden within. So you kind of get to a point where you can't really take things in. You just have to be in a quiet space with a simple life to be able to digest. So we need moments and stages of peace in our everyday life, even if it's like 10 minutes, just going to lie down somewhere quiet, or even not quiet. Like, since being a parent, I have to kind of completely rethink all this, because before I used to kind of live in a community with other people practicing as well, and everyone would kind of go off to their rooms and people would just leave me alone if I wanted to be alone, and I could just do that. But now there's a child, so I can't just like, okay, leave me alone now. So I have to find ways of doing it. So it might be just lying on the ground while she's playing with her toys and kind of slightly keeping an eye on her. But also, as much as I can, whenever possible, whenever it's convenient, going out and being in nature on my own or meditating on my own, that sort of thing, just kind of. But then more broadly, is simplifying my life as much as I can. So since I started practicing Buddhism, I've not that I had a complicated life. I was only 17, so I couldn't have a complicated life. Although I was doing loads of things. Well, I'm glad I just found it out at that age, because it meant I didn't get into any sort of any complications in life. So, and I've learned to live quite simply. I've never been interested in earning lots of money or having lots of possessions, so which is one thing that the Buddha again would say, kind of like, if you're kind of constantly preoccupied by money and possessions and external objects, then again you're neglecting yourself. It might seem like you're kind of looking after yourself, like kind of more comfort, more kind of pleasant things, etc. But actually, you're sort of neglecting yourself. You're not really looking after, you're not really being with yourself, which is what the Buddha is encouraging. A simple life, a contented life where you are with yourself. So meditation comes into place, but any other things, maybe kind of doing a bit of crazy dancing on your own around the bathroom or the lounge, or going out into nature, whatever it is, just kind of simplifying your life. That might mean, for some of you, that you might want to reduce your hours at work, if that's possible. You might want to reduce your hours at work so that you have time just to do nothing, but just to not spend time with people that you really love, doing things that you really like. and then things that are completely useless, like lying on the floor and not doing anything for a little bit. And that is nourishing, just being with yourself. So that's then the next aspect of it. Calm, senses calmed. And then from there he talks about, so he brings in not doing things that wiser men would kind of, what's the word that he used? My censure. And this is really important. It's been very important for me because I don't really, a lot of the time I don't know what's best for me. I need wiser people to be around me to kind of to consult with. So this is an element of surrounding yourself with people who are you consider to be wiser, people who are more contented than you, people who are more aware, people who are better able to give to others. You might not know why, but they seem to kind of be quite resourced and happy in themselves. I don't mean necessarily people who kind of are all the time doing things and they seem really good at them, and not necessarily, but there might be attention there. So there's two kinds of people who kind of give, but there's attention. There's a kind of like they're not really, again, this going back, they're not really looking after themselves. There's a different kind of person who gives from a real kind of, from being in contact with a sense of abundance. So surrounding yourself with that sort of people really helps surrounding yourself with people like that. This reminds me of going to see my teacher a few years ago, and we just had a conversation about, I don't know, like poetry, and he came really alive when we talked about poetry. The conversation itself wasn't particularly significant. There was this, he's gone now, Sangharakshita. He's kind of written many books. He's being the one influence after my parents, the main influence in my life. His teachings and the movement that he created, the Buddhist community that he created, has shaped my life. So there I was in front of him, and the chat was kind of a bit boring mostly. But at the end, I left after about 40 minutes being with him, and as soon as I left the room, I was left with this beautiful kind of sense of stillness, a bit like I had been meditating really deeply. I had just been having a kind of chat about nothing much. But I had this really sort of deep sense of groundedness, clarity of mind, concern for other people. I felt really light. And he was like, oh, this is interesting. It definitely wasn't coming from me. It was a definite sort of like, in Buddhism we talk about transmission. It was like his presence, his being. He was completely calm. He was really with me. He was really interested in what I was saying. And he had been meditating, practicing Buddhism for all of his life. From when he was 16, he was 80 something by the time I met him. So this was a man of weight, of real weight. And just being with him had a big effect on me. Had a real big effect on me. And that taught me something about, I don't need to kind of have really deep conversations with people. I just need to surround myself with weighty people, weighty men and women that kind of are upright, able, straightforward, and that I can just be straightforward with them. There's something about that. And I think when people met the Buddha, that's often what they would get. They would get probably something similar to what I got when I met Sangharakshita. They kind of, you get these discourses again and again where people are completely, even just seeing the Buddha, there seemed to be a kind of aura, a kind of beauty to him that people felt drawn to. I really love trying to imagine that. This person with a completely open heart, who is really free and spontaneous to give. So when he meets you, he's just there with you, and it's like, whoa, blimey. Or he would maybe envelop you with a lovely kind of presence and sense of love, and that you really matter. And another aspect of it is that I think meeting the Buddha, you're meeting someone who has he's awake, he's fully awake to reality. He's seeing constantly in contact with how things are. So you kind of in contact with someone who has no tensions, because he's not resisting anything. He just sees things as they really are. And the manifestation of that is real care, love, and concern. So you're kind of enveloped by that. You're kind of embraced by that. And people would feel overwhelmed, and often get a kind of a glimpse of like their lives would change dramatically in an instant. And there were other people who just thought, nah, who are you? So it's not necessarily that if you meet an enlightened person, you would kind of change immediately. It requires receptivity as well. And then the rest of the sutta, the rest of this discourse is basically saying, develop a boundless heart, develop loving thoughts, a loving attitude, kind attitude towards all living beings. So he lists all shapes and forms, formless beings. It's interesting that it kind of says those who are seen and not seen. So you can interpret that as things that you can actually see with your senses, and things that you can't. So that's another. It's another dimension that you encounter again and again. The Buddha talking about what he called devas, or kind of gods and goddesses, not in this sort of Christian sense, but sort of spirits, more like spirits, what you might call spirits. Again and again, he'll kind of have a chat with them. In the middle of the night, spirits will come and visit the Buddha, and he'll teach them his teaching so that they could be free. So I find that really fascinating, that it's not just human beings that we are kind of trapped in our own stuff and therefore we suffer. It's spirits as well. Spirits are caught up in their own sort of spirity stuff, and they suffer. They also suffer, so they kind of came to visit the Buddha. I think there's so... I don't know. I won't say this because I don't know it for sure, so I won't say it. I will say it. There's an older member called Mokshananda. He lives in Spain, and he's been practicing for ages. And he talks very straightforwardly about seeing all sorts of things. And this is a very upright, straightforward, capable man who he's not airy-fairy at all. And I was on retreat with him once, and he would kind of give little talks. And again he would say, oh, last night a dwarf came to visit me. And he would say it just in the most straightforward thing. So I met one-to-one with him and sort of asked him about that. And he said, yeah, I've seen other beings since I was a child. It's like, it's part of my experience. It's nothing kind of, he doesn't make a big deal out of it. He's just like, that's it. I haven't seen anything, but I completely and fully trust him. So, and I completely and fully trust the Buddha as well. So I think there might be a gathering of spirits here with us, listening to the Dharma, and hopefully, I hope this is helpful for you to unseen beings. Okay, and seeing as we are getting into a slightly different sort of dimension, I want to bring another text, just a few lines from another text, another of mine. So the Karaniya Metta Sutta is probably the one I keep going back to. This is an early text, an early discourse from the Buddha. And then you have the Vimalakirti Nirdesa. I don't expect you to remember this, but which is a later text, a Buddhist text, which is very magical. It's very kind of, it gives you visions of countless universes that you can see in a tent like this. So there would be, it kind of starts with the Buddha kind of sitting with a gathering, and a few young men from the village bring parasols to offer the Buddha, and the Buddha transforms them into this great canopy, a bit like this. And then by his magical powers, the Buddha transforms this huge canopy into like the whole universe. So within the canopy, you can see universes after universes after universes. You can see all the stars, all the moons, all the suns. You can see living beings living in all different galaxies. You can see Buddha's teaching. You can see trees, plants, all sorts. So within this great canopy, by the magical powers of the Buddha, he kind of makes people see that. And this discourse is kind of, it goes on like that. But he focuses on Vimalakirti, who is this man who lives in the village. And everyone in the village loves Vimalakirti. Everyone, from the tradesmen to the king and the even like the prostitutes and everyone seems to like Vimalakirti is a kind of presence in the village that encourages living beings to be better. So he goes into all sorts of places and brings out the best in people. But the monks are really scared of Vimalakirti, because when they meet Vimalakirti, Vimalakirti kind of shows them their limitations, kind of shows them that they don't really understand the Buddha's teaching. So they kind of are left all humiliated. And I think this is an act of love, of loving kindness from Vimalakirti as well. So there's another thing that good friends, good wise people would do for you. They would show you your limitations, and that would be uncomfortable, but you need that in order to actually grow. And I don't know if you're familiar with this term bodhisattva. So I don't want to get too technical, but so a bodhisattva is someone who's striving towards enlightenment to benefit the whole universe. So Vimalakirti is a bodhisattva, and he's striving towards awakening to benefit all the universes. And so another bodhisattva comes and visits him, and they have a chat, really quite intense chat. And there's a particular question that Manjushri, this other bodhisattva, so Manjushri, you'll see the figure of Manjushri outside with the sword. He's the bodhisattva of wisdom. He represents wisdom. So they're archetypal as well. They're not necessarily kind of human beings. They're archetypal figures. Thereupon, Manjushri, the crown prince, addressed the Lichavi Vimalakirti. Good sir, how should a bodhisattva regard all living beings? Vimalakirti replied, Manjushri, a bodhisattva should regard all living beings as a wise man regards the reflection of the moon in water, whereas a magician regards men created by magic. He should regard them as being like a face in a mirror, like the water of a mirage, like the sound of an echo, like a mass of clouds in the sky, like the previous moment of a bowl of foam, like the appearance and disappearance of a bubble of water, like the core of a plantain tree, etc., like a flash of lightning, etc., etc. Precisely thus, Manjushri, thus a bodhisattva who realizes ultimate selflessness, considers all living beings. I'll stop there, and then there's a few more lines that I want to read. The reason why I wanted to bring in this text is because, so the Karaniya Metta Sutta tells you that you should love all living beings, and it kind of tells you that you should be able and open, everything that I've been talking about just until now. And this is not, I think it's implicit. The last verse, which I didn't read, it says something like, you shouldn't hold, not falling into wrong views, being virtuous and endowed with insight. He is awake. He kind of, by developing loving kindness and not holding on to wrong views, you can gain awakening, and you can really and truly love without illusions. So it's there, the kind of wisdom is there, but the Vimalakirti Nirdesa is very explicit. So there's a wisdom in the Karaniya Metta Sutta. It sort of expresses what an enlightened person would do. They would just be loving towards all living beings. But the Vimalakirti Nirdesa is saying, how should you, if you want to love all living beings, the first question is, how should you consider them? How should you view them? And Vimalakirti, who is the wisest man around in the town, and then he's approved by the Buddha says, yes, Vimalakirti is right, is that you should see them as a bubble. I really wanted to bring bubbles and blow bubbles at you, but I didn't find any. So I did have some, and then I lost them. So lack of mindfulness from my part. So imagine a great big bubble. So I'm going to blow a great big bubble at you. And there it goes. Big bubble. I might refer back to Gilead. I saw a bubble float past my window, fat and wobbly and ripening towards that dragonfly blue they turned just before they burst. So Vimalakirti uses various images, lightning, bubble, the core of a plantain tree, a mirage. I've been trying to reflect about these images, and they're ungraspable, and they're kind of, if you think about, he's asking us to see all living beings as a bubble, or as the core of a plantain tree, or as a mirage, like the water of a mirage. So they're not there. A mirage is not there. You sort of see it from the distance, but you get near and it's not there. A bubble appears, it's beautiful, and pop, it disappears. You can't hold it. You kind of, as soon as you're trying to hold it, unless there's some chemicals that make them really hard, but they will burst anyway eventually. So you can't hold the bubble. Core of a plantain tree, hollow, just in case you didn't know. And the lightning. So a lightning is, what's a lightning? It just happens suddenly, boom. There's lightning. Excuse my special effects. It's beautiful, isn't it? A lightning, when you look at it at the distance, it's beautiful. It's just this beautiful light, and it's got different colors. But it's just a moment. It passes, just happens, and then it's gone. And you get a flash of like everything's illuminated suddenly, and then it's gone. So if we think about living beings like that, that's the reality of all of us. So if you look at your experience, I might stand up for a bit. So if you look at your experience, particularly in meditation, when you get calm and concentrated, it's a bit like coming near to a mirage. You don't find anything that is stable. For instance, have a look at your feelings right now. What are you feeling? What are you feeling right now? So it might be, let's say physical sensations. So you might feel, everyone's experience will be different. So you might feel the kind of hardness of the floor. You might feel aches or your body aching somewhere, itchy, feeling quite comfy, feeling hot, feeling warm. And if you look at that, so say my left foot is cold right now. And if I look at that experience, it's sort of shifting. Temperature is sort of shifting all the time. So that's one example. My thoughts, right now, I'm fairly concentrated because I'm having to concentrate in giving a talk. But that involves a flow of thoughts. That involves me kind of thinking what I'm going to say and saying it. And then when I say it, that's gone. That's my thought gone. And then another one comes. And then my mind might go blank. And then another thought might come. And every sensation in my body, my feelings, my emotions, everything. So what's there? What's there that I can say, this is Amalasiddhi, this is me? I haven't found anything just yet. And one day I was on a long retreat, my ordination retreat, where I got my name and my kesa. This is a kesa. And I was walking around the valley. This is in the mountains in Spain. I was walking around the valley, one of the valleys, and suddenly, I had been there for a couple of months, and suddenly this valley just burst into flower, it was like magic. It was one day it wasn't there, and then the following day I went for a walk, and all these flowers were so beautiful and delicate. And I think partly because I had been meditating all those months, and I was in a really positive state of mind. That struck me as an image of that's kind of life. It was so beautiful, but the flowers were so delicate. They suddenly appeared, and the following day they were not there anymore. But I felt so happy. I felt so happy to be able to see so clearly the fact that those flowers were beautiful, but they were so delicate and they were gonna die. I didn't feel any sense of regret. I didn't feel any sense of like, oh no, they're not going to be here tomorrow. I didn't feel any of that. I didn't feel any tensions. I felt completely relaxed and able just to see the flowers and really appreciate the flowers. So the happiest moments in my life have been when I'm able to fully see a situation, a person, and myself as bubbles, and truly appreciating the beauty. When I'm not in contact with this wisdom, I suffer because I'm sort of trying to get hold of a particular experience. So I'm trying to get people to be something they're not, or trying to give me something that they can't give me. or I have unrealistic expectations of myself, or I kind of seeing myself as something that I'm not, and that's kind of contriving, and it's like, oh, it's very uncomfortable. But if I remember, and it's not, it needs to be a mental remembering, but also it's like if I remember in my bones, that even my bones are not solid, are not that solid, they're ever changing, there's a relaxation, there's a, it's all right, I can just breathe, I can just drink the water, I can, go about my life, and I can interact with other people, it's all right, there's no tensions. So a lot of the happiest moments in my life have been being in contact with this sense of life is just real flux. And whenever my relationships with people have been the best, this is all kinds of relationships, friendships and romantic relationships, on my relationship with my parents, is when I remember that other people I'm in a relationship with are not fixed. So I can really appreciate them. What happens is that it brings out the beauty. I really love the image of a bubble. Partly because it's beautiful and it's so impermanent and it's so playful at the same time. When you see other beings like that, you can really appreciate their beauty. So we need to develop, in order to truly love, I think we need to develop this insight. And again, I'll go back to my daughter, Noura. So she was born because my wife and I had sex. And then, I know. And then all sorts of conditions. She was in my wife's belly, and, all this like infinite sort of conditions that bring about a human being. And then there she was, and she needed nourishment and water and mostly milk to begin with, and but she's so ungraspable. That's where I see it the most clearly with my daughter, because she's so small, and she's been growing so quickly that I really get a beautiful sense of that kind of like I can't grasp her. She's nothing to be grasped. There's nothing in her that I can grasp. And that's actually a bit painful. That's actually a bit painful because as a parent, I think the downside of being a parent is that there's two things about being a parent. One is that you are not separated from your children. Noura is just a part of me. I don't have to think about it. She is just me. I'm deeply connected to her. And therefore I deeply love her. The downside with that, if I don't bring any wisdom to that, is that she just becomes a sort of extension of myself, and in a kind of negative sense, I just trying to control her and kind of keep her nearby and trying to kind of like, which doesn't work. She's just gonna keep growing. Hopefully, I hope she keeps growing and become an adult and live and do her own thing and live her own life. So it's only when I bring this wisdom to mind, this wisdom that the Buddha is saying, you're going to suffer if you don't see with wisdom. If I don't bring this wisdom to mind in relation to my daughter, I really suffer. If he causes a lot of anxiety. It's like, oh, she's going to get a boyfriend at some point. No, or a girlfriend maybe. Or, I don't know, she's going to go off to parties or whatever. And it just causes so much like, I can't control her. And she started walking, so she goes off and is like, I wish I could just like, I wish you could just obey me and just, when I say ven, which means come in Spanish, she would just come, but she doesn't. She just runs off. And that causes me so much pain if I don't remember that she's her own being. The truth is, we are deeply connected. I'm deeply connected with her. And in fact, we're all deeply connected. And it's also true that she's completely her own being. She's completely independent. So I need to remember them both. If I only remember one, I will suffer, and I won't be a very good dad, I don't think. But if I remember both, that I need to look after her, I need to nourish her, she's just completely my being, and I'll do whatever to kind of really look after her, while at the same time acknowledging that there's so many factors out of my control, that she's her own being, she's going to make her own decision. It feels like even the time she was born, I look at those eyes and I knew she'd come with something already. She'd kind of, she has her own will. There's something about her that I can't grasp and I can't control. So she's her own being. So if I remember that, I can truly love her and I can truly look after her, while at the same time being quite playful and light and not worrying too much about what's going to happen. Proliferation in my mind, I can just let go of that and just be present with her. Now, I better look at the time. Aha. Let's go back to this. Precisely thus, Manjushri, does a bodhisattva who realizes ultimate selflessness considers all living beings. Manjushri then asks further, Noble Sir, if a bodhisattva considers living beings in such a way, how does he generate the great love towards them? Vimalakirti replied, Manjushri, when a bodhisattva considers all living beings in this way, he thinks, just as I have realized Dharma, so I should teach it to living beings. Thereby, he generates the love that is truly a refuge for all living beings, the love that is peaceful because free of grasping, the love that is not feverish because free of passions, the love that accords with reality because it is equanimous in all three times, the love that is without conflict because free of the violence of the passions. Just a sip of water and then carry on. Thereby he generates the love that is firm, its high resolve unbreakable like a diamond, the love that is pure, purified in its intrinsic nature, the love that is even, its aspirations being equal, the Buddha's love that causes living beings to awaken from their sleep. And so it goes. The love that is happiness because it introduces living beings to the happiness of the Buddha. Such, Manjushri, is the great love of a bodhisattva. So my last point, just to finish, I said that what I want for my daughter is the greatest happiness that she can experience. Partly because I know I've reflected over the years that material things are not going to make you happy. And although I want to provide kind of enough for her to kind of grow up healthy and psychologically and emotionally happy, I know that is not going to be enough for her. It's never going to be. I know that's not enough for me. And I know the only thing that is truly going to fulfill me and make me happy, even beyond happiness, even beyond pleasant and unpleasant, is realizing my own potential. So the happiness of the Buddha, to realize the happiness of the Buddha. The Buddha is the happiest person in the world. Those who have seen reality are the happiest, most loving people in the world. So that's what I want for my daughter, and that's what I want for all living beings. I think any parent would, that's what they want the greatest. We might not know what the greatest thing is for the great things is, but we want the greatest for our children. And so that means, I think this is the first thing he says, just as I have realized the Dharma, so I should teach it to all living beings. Goes back to this, like you have to realize that things are not fixed. There's nothing that you can grasp on. Nevertheless, there are things manifesting, requiring attention and love. So you can truly love them if you don't hold any tensions and fixed sort of views and expectations. You can really, truly love them. If you truly see that wisdom and know that through that wisdom you yourself are happy, then that's what you want to pass on to other people. You want to pass on that wisdom, so that's what you want to pass on to your children. And now I'm a father, so I'm using this kind of language of children, and the Buddha used, and he was a father. But I wanted to make clear that you can use it as a metaphor. I'm not saying everyone go and have children, and then you can really know how to love. I'm not saying that at all. So you can use it as a metaphor. You can get a sense of of taking responsibility for someone and truly love them and truly kind of see them for who they are, which is ungraspable and wondrous, and really love them. So you pass on this with, and then the Buddha is saying you reflect that no, it's not just towards one person, because if you focus only on one person, it's also not going to work. You need to expand, broaden your attention to all living beings. He's saying it's only going to work if you bear in mind all living beings. Now, a warning is that you can't practically look after all living beings. You can't provide for all living beings. But what he's saying, and what the Buddha dedicated his life to, is to develop their minds and hearts for them to be truly happy. So that's what we can do. That's the kind of, we can develop our own minds and trying to strive to become Buddhas, to taste the happiness of the Buddha, and pass that on. That can be our task. In whatever interaction we have, we can try to be as loving and as present as possible. And that's what I feel like. That's what life is about. You're trying to pass on as much wisdom as you can, as much freedom as you can, to the next generation and to people around you. So that's how we build a society that is based on love. Whatever living beings there be, feeble or strong, tall, stout or medium, short, small or large, without exception, seen or unseen, those dwelling far or near, those who are born or yet to be born, may all beings be happy. Let none deceive another, nor despise any person whatsoever in any place. Let him nor wish any harm to another, out of anger or ill will. Just as a mother would protect her only child at the risk of her own life, even so let him cultivate a boundless heart towards all living beings. Let his thoughts of boundless love pervade the whole world. Whether he stands, walks, sits, or lies down, as long as he is awake, he should develop this mindfulness. This, they say, is the noblest living here.